I was going to ask you about Richard Spencer, but that's really not the right question. Do you think hate speech, I was going to tie the hate speech into him, but it's really irrelevant on him. Do you think hate speech should be banned?
Well, that's what I was saying in the last segment. Here's my debate, Ricky. Assuming that you're calling for a serious conversation rather than to just troll me. On the one hand, we have no shortage of evidence. Whether we're talking about the lynchings that happened with the Klan over a multi-hundred-year period. The Klan has not been around that long, but basically the consequence of hate speech. The rise of the Nazis in Germany, the use of race as a wedge in other countries, Brazil, Chile. We have no shortage of evidence that hate speech leads to the destruction of civil society and ultimately to death, and the death of millions of people in the case of World War II. There's no shortage of that evidence. On the other hand, when you give the government the power to censor anything, you are always at risk of being the next person who is censored. And this is where, there was a strong argument, or an argument anyway, made about some kinds of pornography being censored. Hey, wait a minute, is this walking down the road, toward something that could be very destructive. If there was some kind of a mechanism to demonstrate exactly what hate speech was, and I think that we're close to that, or we could figure that out, and to say, and this is what we all agree is not an appropriate dialogue or discourse within the government circles. Well, actually, banning hate speech, it would be across the entire country. It's like in Germany, you can't even walk into a private bar and yell Sieg Heil or sing the Horst Wessel song. So, on the one hand, I would like it banned. On the other hand, I don't want to be the guy who's being accused of hate speech and thus being banned myself. Am I making sense, Ricky?
You are, but here's the flaw. So if you ban hate speech, define it whatever you want, do you extend that to text?
T-E-X-T?
Yes, books. Do you extend that to books?
Oh.
And if so, the Bible and the Quran have caused more death and destruction than any two books in history. So you're really going down a slippery slope on banning hate speech.
Yeah.
Because if you've ever picked up a Quran, it's hate front to back.
Well, I have picked up the Quran, and it's not hate front to back, but I've also read the Bible from cover to cover 4 times. And I'll tell you, you get into the book of Joshua, for example, it's just blood from one end to the other. I'm not sure, though, that you could call any of that hate speech. And this is where protection of religion comes in. But your point is well taken, Ricky. Thanks for the call. It's an insanely slippery slope, and I'm playing with the idea of sliding down it.
Hey, Dr. Hartmann, I have a question. My question is, I'm with free speech, too. I love free speech. But my question is, what's the difference, and this is to the Trump supporters, and if you can answer it, that's even better, between the neo-Nazis having the ability for Ziegel and their swastikas and Colin Kaepernick and Jeremiah Wright and their free speech? What is the difference between the two? I was just curious.
There's a huge difference, and it has to do with harm, with violence. Colin Kaepernick is not calling for anything that anybody could get beat up, shot, put in prison, murdered, whatever, over. He is calling for justice. That's what Colin Kaepernick is doing. The Nazis are not calling for justice. They're calling for racial division. They're calling for the not just separation and exclusion of people of color from normal discourse in society, but in some cases even the death of those people. And so I think that there's a huge difference, and that's when I'm saying I'm gradually moving toward thinking that the European take on hate speech, which by the way it's looking increasingly like all the guys involved with the killing in Barcelona Thursday or Friday last week. Mm-hmm. All the guys associated with that were all from one little town way up in northern Spain that happens to have one crazy imam who has been clearly influenced by Saudi Arabian Wahhabism. And so, you know, I'm guessing that the Spanish are going to say, this is hate speech. This guy inspired these people to murder a bunch of people. That inspiration was hate speech in and of itself, and hold that imam accountable. And I would support that if you could draw that line of causality. It's something for the courts, but you would have to prove, you know, in a court of law. And so I would say that anybody whose speech could lead to, you know, some substantial harm, some measurable harm, not just, you know, my feelings are hurt, but actual harm, that would qualify as a crime. And right now, by and large, it does. You know, I mean, if you threaten somebody with physical violence, that threat is illegal. So, you know, it may be that we already have these laws and we just need to be, you know, more rigorous in the way that we enforce them. But, so anyhow, does that make sense, Alan?
Yes, it sure does. I love you, Dr.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Great to hear from you. I appreciate the call. Norma in Woodridge, Illinois. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom, and thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
In terms of the Nazis, I think the Nazis are treasonous. They've done damage. People have gotten, African Americans have gotten hung. A lot of destruction has been because of them.
Agreed.
So I think they need to be exiled, and they're treasonous, and they need to get rid of them.
Yeah. So this is where we'd have to figure out what are the actual lines here. If they're engaged in hate speech that might cause people like that fool who drove his car down, you know, into the crowd of people and injured 19 people and killed Heather Heyer. If they're going to cause people to do things like that, then they should be held responsible for the incitement of that action. And even when that action doesn't happen. And so then it becomes a question of how do we clearly define this? And I believe the definitions are out there. Norma, well said. Thank you very much for the call.